Okay, last time we were learning about the dinim of Erev Pesach. No mizmah Seder, the time you're allowed to eat chametz till until the time you have to burn chametz to, when you have to nullify the chametz. We learned that some people have a minig, which is our minig, that you don't eat any of the ingredients of modern Characets from Erev Pesach until Kerach of the second Seder. Now, generally speaking, it says in halacha, you're not allowed to begin the Seder before nightfall, any year. This year, they changed the clock, it's even harder. But because when it comes to eating matzah, the Torah says it has to be balayla hazeh, at night. When the Chachamim instituted the 4 cups of wine, they instituted similar to the biblical mitzvah of matzah. Therefore, the Chacham said, even though on a regular Shabbos, you could bring Shabbos in early, you could make Kiddush earlier, but the night of Pesach, you're not allowed to make Kiddush before nightfall. Which here in LA, you have to, at this time of the year, you have to count at least a half an hour after sundown. But before that, you're not allowed to begin the Seder. Nevertheless, halacha says that you should try to have everything ready before the Seder, that when you come home, all you have to do is, which is according to our custom, we set up the Seder plate at night when we come home. Even the Seder plate, we don't set, everything else you set up during the day, but you don't set up the Seder plate until the night of the Pesach Seder. Now, because the first night is Friday night, which limits cooking and those types of things, so there's certain things that you need to do before Shabbos begins. For instance, the salt water that you use for the, karpas and those that eat the egg and salt water, whatever. So that has to be made before Shabbos. If you didn't, and you're going to make it the night, Friday night, you have to make a very small amount, only the amount that you're going to be using at the Seder, nothing more. So the best thing halachically, it says in Shulchan Aruch, is that the salt water you should make before Friday night, before Shabbos begins. Another thing that you have to make, obviously if you're having roasting the zeroya, the shengbone, or the whatever you use, and you want to roast the egg or cook the egg, whatever, all that stuff has to be done Friday night. It's not Yom Tov, you can't cook. Even the Characets, many people have a minute, they mix the Characets with wine. So in Shulchan Aruch it says you have to mix the Characets with wine, preferably before Shabbos begins. If you did do it Friday night before the Seder, then the din is first you put the Characets and then you add the wine. And you can't stir it because then you're going to be kneading, K-N-E-A-D, kneading the Characets with the wine, which is forbidden to do on Shabbos. So therefore, you have to make sure, because it's Friday night, you have to make sure that the salt water should be made before Shabbos. The Characets with wine should preferably also be made before Shabbos. Now, when it comes to the Seder, okay, first let's discuss Ma'ariv. So because Ma'ariv is, let's go to Mincha, to go backwards. Now, the custom is after Mincha, an Erev Pesach, hopefully before Shkia, you say what's called Seder Korban Pesach. It's in the Sidurim. You actually say verbally the order of the Paschal lamb, the Korban Pesach, that they brought in the Beis Hamikdash. So you daven Mincha a little bit earlier, that you should have time before Shkia to say the Korban Pesach. Ma'ariv begins Friday night, because it's Friday night and Yom Tiv. So Ma'ariv begins with Mizmor LeDavid. You don't begin L'chun Ranano because it's Yom Tiv. So you begin with Mizmor LeDavid, and there are again many different customs. Our custom is you go through all the L'chadodis. In other words, instead of starting L'chun Ranano, you start a few pages later. Mizmor LeDavid, you go through all the L'chadodis. Ma'ariv is a regular Friday night Ma'ariv, but the Shmoneh Esrei, the Amidah, you go to Shalosh Regalim, the Yom Tif one, and you add the Shabbos additions. Our custom is that after Ma'ariv we say complete Hallel both nights of Pesach. It's all the Hasidic Olam does Hallel the night of Pesach, both nights. There's a lot of stories brought down in the Hasidic history books about, because in the Litvische world, the Besnagdim didn't say Halal the night of Pesach. And there are stories about the Chassidim, they had a lot of people, but they were in a non-Chassidic show. So after everybody left, they would make a minyan for Halal. And then the next morning they found out about it, there would be arguments and fights and everything else. Because Ramah writes, we don't have such a minig. So I think it was the Alter Rebbe, before he was the famous Alter Rebbe, said to them, when they said, the Ramah says, no, and we go by the Ramah. The Alter Rebbe says, were you there when the Ramah wrote what he wrote? Maybe the Ramah wrote it as follows. It's such a good custom, and Nebuch, we don't have that custom. We, Nebuch, don't have such a custom. But anyway, our minhag is that we say the entire Halal with a bracha, beginning and end, and we say them both nights of Pesach. After you go home, you have to start to Seder as soon as possible. Why? That the kids shouldn't fall asleep, and even if the adults shouldn't fall asleep. The adults shouldn't fall asleep. I mentioned the other day, we can't complain. California is not bad, because in California you could probably begin the Seder. 1 second, I did the same thing last week.
8:15.
No, you could start.
You said 8:05.
8:05, you could start to say 8:05 in LA. You could start to say that. That's not bad in certain places. I mentioned last week in Canada, in Northern Europe. You know, some of them can't start until 9:30, 10 o'clock. They can't begin the Seder because you're not allowed to. Because Dalit cases, and the first one is Kiddush. So the Chacham made it like the night. You have to do it at night. So you can't make Kiddush before nightfall. You're not going to matzah if you eat a matzah before nightfall. What?
Also, the second one is even later.
Second one is not that much later, by the way. So the problem is this year Mitzvah Shabbos we'll learn because you're going from Shabbos to after Shabbos. I'll tell you where you have bigger problems. In communal Sdorim, in people that have Chabad houses that to make, let's say, both nights a communal Seder. So then you can't really, it's like just the first night you could set it Friday afternoon, you could set everything up, the tables and the chairs and everything. But the second night, you really can't do anything until Shabbos is over. So you can't do anything, you can't even start setting up until 8:05, let alone you can't start cooking. But there is a Prima Godim that people rely on, that the Prima Godim says, a goy can do things on Shabbos for after Shabbos if it's not a big bother, like setting the tables, that a goy would be allowed to do. Even somebody's house, a goy can set the table, but they can't do any food preparation on Shabbos for the second night because you're not allowed to prepare from Shabbos for the weekday. Okay, now there's a lot of also different customs. So let's go through the objects of the Seder, and we'll discuss what the custom is, and what you use, and what different people use, and so on is like this. You have the 3 matzahs. Now let's explain about the Seder plate before we go into the details. The Seder plate, there's a lot of different customs how to set up the Seder plate, by the way. The universally accepted tradition that you have in we used to call them the Maxwell House Haggadahs. Remember those things? Maxwell House used to give out Haggadahs with the ads for Maxwell House coffee, OUP or OKP, whatever it was. The older people here might remember it. Anyway, so the Seder plate that we have today, you know, right, left, center, that's in the Arizal. The Ramah had a different Seder plate, the Vilna Gaon had a different Seder plate. A lot of people had different Seder plates. The Seder plate that's universally accepted in the world at large is the Arizal Seder plate. Now, the way we do it is because everything is Kabbalistic and everything is spiritual. So most people have the 3 matzahs, and then they have a separate Seder plate. You know, they put the Seder plate and the matzah separate. Our custom, according to our custom and Kabbalah, is we put the 3 matzahs down. First we have a tray at the bottom, like silver plate, whatever. You have a tray at the bottom. And then on top of that, with a napkin or cloth separation, you put the 3 matzahs, the bottom, middle, and top, which itself is 2 opinions in Kabbalah. Is it Kohen, Levi, Yisrael, or is it Yisrael, Levi, Kohen? Is it Keli or Yelech? Okay? So anyway, there's different customs how to do it, but that's not relevant. So you have the Seder plate, the tray at the bottom. You put the 3 matzahs on top of the Seder plate with a napkin or cloth separation. And then you put something on top of the 3 matzahs. And we put the Seder plate directly on top of the matzahs. So we don't use the actual Seder plate, it will break the matzahs. I mean, you could if you have a light one. But we put the Seder plate directly on top of the matzahs. And we don't, again, Zrei, Beit, Tamar, Characets, Karpas, and Characets. Why do we do it like that?
Have to touch each other, the plate and...
No, they don't touch each other.
They can have something.
Yeah. Now, why do we do it like that? Because then you have all 10 attributes. The 3 matzahs represent Chochmah, Bina, and Das, the intellect. Then you have the 6 things on the Seder plate, is the 6 spheres. Chesed, Gvura, Tiferes, Netzach, Chayid, Yesod. If you see, ever see Kabbalah pictures? So Chesed on the right, Gvura is on the left, Tiferes in the middle, Netzach, Chayid, Yesod. So then you have like this, according to our Cheshbon, the plate at the bottom, a keli is a level of malchus. Because malchus is kresi shur seshta, malchus is a kli, a vessel that holds things. Then on top of that, you have the 3 matzahs, which is Chochmah, Bina, and Das. And then you have the 6 spheres. So on the Seder plate itself, you have all 10 spheres. Okay, that's how you do it.
Do we somehow incorporate the typical kaira, like the cloth, as people tash? Does that go on top of the plate? And that's very common. I never.
What do you mean, the tash?
There's a tash with 3 pockets where you put 3 matzahs.
Yeah, you mean a metal one?
Not a metal. Cloth.
A cloth, yeah? A matzah cover.
That goes on top of a plate.
Yeah. The Rebbe writes, in Sefer Ben Hogim, the Rebbe writes that in Beis Harav, only the Rebbe had the ka'ara at the bottom, the plate at the bottom. But the Rebbe writes that's only in Beis Harav. Outside of the Rebbe's house, everybody should have, those that have a Seder plate, should have their own plate at the bottom. But then, because then you have all 10 spheres. There's nothing wrong using a matzah cover. Many matzah covers are made with 3 compartments to put the...
in between.
Yeah, to put in between. But then we put, we cover, you don't want to get the matzah sweat, right? So then you could put it into silver paper, you could put it into a napkin, whatever you want to put it into.
Silver plate on top.
Silver plate on top?
No, not silver plate. Silver paper.
Oh, right, that's what you said, aluminum foil. You put it on the top, and that protects the matzah. That's what I do. But you just protects the matzah on top, that nothing should get wet. That's all. Now, what do we use for the Seder plate? Zreya is, in English, is translated as the shank bone. So some people use the shank bone of an animal. Our custom is to use a chicken neck. Use the neck of a chicken, roasted, but we take off most of the meat from the neck. Why? It shouldn't be of any similarity to the Korban Pesach, which is, by the way, we'll learn to. That's why, according to halacha, it's forbidden to eat a pot roast on both nights of Pesach. A pot roast means meat or chicken that's not cooked in any liquid. A pot roast, by definition, means you take a thing of meat, a chunk of meat, and you put it in a pot without any liquid. That, it says in Shchunar, you're not allowed to eat. It's called...
Pour like a tiny bit of water in there.
If you pour a little bit of water in it to wine or anything, it's good. But the thing without any liquid, it says in Shchunar, you're not allowed to eat it because it's too similar to the Korban Pesach that had to be roasted without any... roasted over an open fire. There's no liquid. So therefore, even though you're doing it in a pot, but if you do it without liquid, then it's a problem. As long as you put in a little bit of liquid, it's good. Anyway, so for Zeraya, our custom is to use the neck of a chicken, remove most of the meat of that, and it's roasted over a fire. For Beitza, the egg, why do we have the Zeraya? Let's discuss. Why do we have the Zeraya? To remind us of the Paschal Lamb. Also,
It's not Zroim, it's Riyah.
Also, it's number one. It's in commemoration of the Paschal Lamb, of Korban Pesach. So, but why is it called Zraya? Because it says that Kadosh Baruch Hu took us out b'Zraya Netuya, outstretched arm. So therefore, it's called Zraya to remind us that Hashem took us out of Galus. Then you have the egg. Why do we have the egg? Many people roast the egg. Our custom is we cook the egg. The reason why we cook the egg, why do we have an egg? That's corresponding with the Korban Chagiga, the Yom Tov Korban that they brought every Korban. Because on Pesach, let me just clarify in the 2 minutes we have left. In the time of the Bais Din, the Korban Pesach was eaten at the end of the meal, when you were already full. First they had the meat of the Korban Chagiga, which was a Korban Shlomim that they brought. That was the meal, together with all the other things they ate. Then, for dessert, they had a kazayas of the Korban Pesach. So the Korban Pesach wasn't the main meal. The main meal was the Korban Chagiga and anything else that they wanted to eat. The Paschal Lamb, the Korban, that's why we eat Afrikaim at the end, because to remind us of the Korban Pesach.
Christian custom, we eat the egg at the end.
Our custom is, before the meal begins, when we're about to start the meal, we start the meal with the egg dipped into salt water. But it's interesting, just to mention this, halachically it doesn't matter, but some people, in order for the egg to sit on the Seder plate, either they would peel it before and put it over there, or many places they would crack the egg, the bottom of the egg, and then it would hold because it's flat. The pearl is brought down that the Rebbe is very machmir, not only to keep in the shell, but not to crack it. In other words, the egg as is, without being cracked, he was makpid. You saw that he was particular about it, that to keep the egg in the shell, not banging the egg to stop. Okay.